We are standing before a massive seismic shift in the food industry, a change deeper than the green revolution of the last century. In the year 2025, the concept of agriculture is being redefined from the vast fields in Iowa to stainless steel tanks placed in warehouses in Singapore or Israel. This is the rise of precision fermentation, a technology that allows us to program microorganisms to create proteins, fats, and vitamins identical to animal products. The bottom line here is a staggering shift in efficiency. We no longer need thousands of hectares of land to raise cows for milk or meat. Instead, we can create the same amount of product with an area 100 times smaller and 10 times less water. This is the end of traditional agriculture and the beginning of bioreal estate. Large food corporations and institutional investors are realizing that the value of agricultural land is being threatened by these laboratories. If you can produce milk without cows and meat without grass, where will the value of millions of hectares of pasture in Brazil or the United States go? We are witnessing a power shift from landowners to genetic patent owners. In this new world, whoever holds the source code of bacteria will be the one controlling the global food supply chain. In these labs, this technology is turning farmers into biological software engineers and directly impacting your wallet. To understand why precision fermentation is an existential threat to traditional agriculture, we must look at it from the perspective of a programmer. For thousands of years, humans have used hardware, cows, pigs, and cornfields to produce protein. But the cow is an extremely inefficient machine. It takes nearly 10 kilograms of grain and thousands of liters of water just to create 1 kilogram of meat. In the year 2025, scientists in Silicon Valley have found a way to bypass that bulky hardware to go straight to the source code of food. They take the genetic code that produces milk protein, or meat heme, and insert them into microorganisms like yeast or bacteria. The core factor here is the collapse of marginal costs. Once you own the genetic patent and the fermentation formula, producing an extra 1,000,000 liters of milk only costs a bit more sugar and electricity. This is the business model of software companies like Microsoft being applied to the food industry. While farmers in New Zealand must worry about weather, disease, and feed prices, the biolords only need to control fermentation tanks in a sterile environment. This creates massive downward price pressure on traditional agricultural commodities. When lab-grown milk becomes 30% cheaper than farm milk, the market will automatically shift without government intervention. This is the birth of the concept of food as a software, where food is designed in a lab to optimize nutrition and flavor. For individual investors, the question is no longer whether it will happen, but who owns the copyrights to these proteins? Giant corporations like Nestle and Tyson Foods are quietly acquiring synthetic biology startups to protect themselves from obsolescence. We are moving from the era of exploiting nature to the era of designing nature. If you still think land is the safest asset, you might be missing the revolution of bioreal estate, where value lies in invisible microorganisms rather than red soil hectares. The battle for control of the human stomach has moved from national borders to the inside of DNA double helices. In economic history, agricultural land has always been considered the safest asset class, an inflation hedge. But the reality of precision fermentation technology is that it is turning land from a profitable asset into a cost burden. In the year 2025, in key agricultural regions of Australia and South America, land rent values are beginning to shake as microbial protein production plants spring up right next to major cities. Let us do a simple calculation. A cattle farm needs thousands of acres and takes years to ship a batch of products, while a fermentation plant can produce the equivalent amount of protein in the area of a single building in a few weeks. The efficiency difference is up to 10,000%. When efficiency skyrockets, the value of the old input, land, is forced to decrease to maintain competitiveness. This leads to a stranded assets scenario for institutional investors holding large amounts of agricultural land. If food corporations switch to sourcing raw materials from labs because costs are cheaper and quality is more stable, those giant fields will become redundant. We are witnessing the end of the landlord era and the rise of the patent owner. The most valuable real estate in the future is not on the Earth's surface, but inside bioreactors. For individual investors, holding traditional agricultural real estate investment trusts is becoming riskier than ever. Instead, cash flow is pouring into companies owning bio-real estate infrastructure, factories that can be reprogrammed to produce anything from collagen and eggs to rare flavorings. This is a new kind of battle for food sovereignty. Nations no longer need to invade land to feed their people. They only need to invest in artificial intelligence and synthetic biology. In the world of Q-Day and AI, food is also becoming a stream of code that can be copied infinitely. If you do not understand this shift, you will continue to pour money into last century's values while the world has moved on to eating food from air. The shift from farm to laboratory is not just a technical change, it is a restructuring of global political and economic power. In the year 2025, we are witnessing the birth of a new concept, biological colonialism. When food is produced by programming microorganisms, control no longer lies with the farmer, with calloused hands, but with the corporations that own the genetic patents. The major consequence here is the monopolization of the most basic human life source. If a few biotech companies in Silicon Valley or Shanghai own the genetic sequences to create the most optimal milk or beef proteins, they will hold the keys to world food security. Traditional agricultural nations in Southeast Asia or Africa could fall into a state of total dependence on importing microbial source code from tech powers. This is a form of digital feudalism applied to the stomach. You cannot produce food yourself without paying royalty fees to the patent owner. For individual investors, the new gold mine lies in companies that own gene libraries and AI microbial design platforms. A company's value is no longer based on the number of livestock they own, but on the number of patents for food molecular structures they hold. We are moving from buying commodities to buying biological solutions. As a result, food supply chains will become extremely concentrated and highly secure, similar to how the pharmaceutical industry operates today. Food will no longer be a commodity traded based on weather and seasons, but a high-tech product with massive profit margins for those holding intellectual property. In this scenario, data transparency and biological privacy become new fronts in the battle to protect personal sovereignty. If you cannot feed yourself without going through a complex encryption system, you have officially become a cog in the profit machine of the biolords. When the barriers between biology and technology are broken, your financial strategy must also evolve so as not to be buried with old values. The final factor of the precision fermentation revolution is the revaluation of the entire concept of safety. In the year 2025, holding assets related to traditional agriculture without the presence of biotechnology is a fatal mistake. Individual investors need to understand that we are moving from surface real estate to intellectual real estate. A smart hedging strategy is to shift capital into businesses owning bio-infrastructure, companies producing large-scale fermentation tanks, microbial culture media suppliers, and AI platforms specializing in protein design. These are the entities that will profit regardless of which food type wins the market, as every lab-grown meat or milk needs the same type of infrastructure to exist. Additionally, keeping a portion of assets in gold or land with multi-purpose value, such as residential land or land with natural clean water sources, is still necessary to deal with quantum shocks or the collapse of encryption systems. However, for the majority of growth assets, you must bet on the genetic patent owners. The battle for bio-real estate does not take place in the fields. It takes place in laboratories in Boston, Singapore, and Shenzhen. If you cannot own the source code of food, you will, or have to pay a biological tax for every meal in your future. Agriculture is no longer about favorable weather. It is about who has the ability to program bacteria better. The world is changing how it feeds itself, and with that, it is changing how money flows across the planet. Remember, in every revolution, those who cling to the past will be the ones funding the prosperity of those who master the future. Do you choose to be the farmer who lost his land, or the owner of the technology that feeds 8 billion people? That choice begins with how you view the piece of meat on your plate, as an agricultural product or as a stream of biological code.